reminder for those hosts, just remember to reset your name because you'll come in automatically as host 500. So name an organization in terms of just resetting that when you show up. All right, Nanda, go ahead.
Yeah. So hi, good morning, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Nanda. I am Corporate Water Stewardship Associate, working for the Water Resources Institute. I'm based in the Netherlands. And today's session is going to be about how businesses can set enterprise water targets across their value chain. So let me start with the slides. So I'm going to share my screen and yeah. All right. Personally, I'm very excited about the session today because we have a very awesome group of speakers. We will have a panel discussion, and the panel discussion is going to be joined by Simone Gillette, who's working for Qantas, and also Vita, who's working for Mars. Neha is working for IKEA, and Colin Strong is going to be the moderator of the panel discussion, and Truka is also going to join as a panelist as well. After the panel discussion, we will go to the presentations of our sessions, and that's going to be from me and also from Colin Strong, Shannon Quinn, who's working for Procter & Gamble, Scott working for Bonneville Environmental Foundation, and Truka that works for Cargill as well. We also have a very exciting way of learning from the sessions today. So in our session, you are going to be able to understand what enterprise water targets are about, but not just understanding, but you will be able to apply what you learned today to actually practice a little bit on, right, hold on, what happened? Practice a little bit on how you can set enterprise water targets on your own. So you're going to have a very small session of practices at the end of the session as well. So the objective of the call today is we want to encourage everyone that all businesses have to tackle the water challenges at the value chain level. So we are going to provide a thorough overview of what the water targets are at the value chain level. We will be going through case studies of Cargill's and P&G on how they set enterprise water targets at value chain level. And like I said, you will be able to practice enterprise water target setting as well on your own. The first 2 hours of sessions are going to be on how other businesses did it. So we will first start with what enterprise water targets are about, and Colin is going to explain more on that. And then we will go on with a panel discussion where we will talk about why enterprise water targets are important, what are the challenges and opportunity, and after setting enterprise water targets, how you can transform businesses as well. Then we will move on with a case study of how Cargill did their enterprise water targets and how P&G also did their enterprise water targets. And then the next 1 hour session is you can actually learn how to set enterprise water targets. So you have to stay until the end of the session to do the hands-on work on how to set enterprise water target. You cannot just jump off in the first 2 hours and to learn how to set an enterprise water target. So you have to wait a bit. In terms of the break, we do not have a set break for you because the session is 3 hours long. So we will try to see how everybody is feeling, and if I sense that you guys are feeling a little bit exhausted, then I will decide when to have a break. Or even if you want to get up on your own, during the sessions, please feel free to do so, because this is a 3 hour session and we don't want you to be stuck at the chair feeling very unhealthy. So the next sessions, I would like to invite Colin Strong to do an opening remarks of what enterprise water targets are about. So Colin.
Great. So Colin Strong, Corporate Water Stewardship Lead at the World Resources Institute. Before we dive into our panel today, I want to take a moment and reflect upon where are we at in the landscape? How do businesses think about this? What has already become standard practice, and where we think we're going from here? So we don't need to go into a lot of depth on why businesses are setting corporate water targets, but essentially the short version is that water is a precious resource. It underlies many of the things that we do in our daily lives. It underlies many of the activities that businesses do, and it is unfortunately a chronically undervalued resource. And corporate water targets are one of the main ways in which businesses start to engage with and respond to the water challenges they face. It's not the only way, but it's one of one of the main ways, and it's really the entry point for many businesses too. The process of setting a corporate water target is quite, there are many layers to it, but simply put, many businesses start by collecting information on what types of risks they face, what types of impacts they have, and then developing some sort of corporate water target. Could be volume or volumetric, quantitative or qualitative, and then developing a strategy. And then after developing a strategy and having a set of targets to move forward with, really putting their head down and trying to do that on the ground work that actually delivers the impact that we're looking for at scale. So corporate water targets are really the entry point for a lot of businesses. Over the last 5 years, the process to develop a corporate water target has really standardized and evolved. If you were trying to set a corporate water target, any value chain or otherwise 5 years ago, there was really a lot less guidance to go on, a lot less standard processes. But now there's been a lot of work. There's some publications, the World Resources Institute and other organizations have been involved in. They really provide a lot more information for how do you set facility level targets? How do you set enterprise level targets really across the board? What are different good practices? What are best practices for developing contextual water targets? Or a lot of this feeds into the science-based targets work. So there's a lot more resources that we have available today that we didn't have available 5 years ago. Overall, this is a good thing. The resources, the standardization, the evolution of the target setting world has really provided a lot more for businesses to work with. And as that standardization process has happened, the scale and the ambition of targets has increased. One of the big areas, though, that remains is that while the scale and the ambition of targets has grown as more and more standards and processes to develop targets have really come out, there isn't as much information on how to apply what we do know and how to apply that across the value chain. So businesses are pretty good at setting operational targets in line with best practices, but the guidance and resources out there today, when you want to look at what are the water issues across your entire value chain, that's a little bit limited. So that's what we're really going to be focusing on today is what is out there to understand water targets across your value chain. What are we talking about when we say water targets across the value chain, and possibly what more is needed. So move to the next slide here. So just to be clear about what are we talking about, because enterprise water targets will be thrown out a lot. What are we talking about here when we talk about value chain targets? So enterprise water target is simply an expected result, or the target, the expected result that describes a company's contributions to improving water resource management across locations where it operates, sources from, or provides goods and services. And the last part here is important for us to unpack. So businesses that are looking at operational water targets, they're frequently targets that will be addressing the highest water risk impact areas, highest water risk and water impact areas of their operations. So a set of priority geographies. These operational water targets can be quantitative or qualitative approaches to incentivize business behavior. And these activities are probably happening possibly within the fence line, nearby communities, catchments connected to these facilities. So in the end, it's about the facility and growing out from there. And when we shift away from this operational perspective into the value chain perspective, this really broadens the lens a lot more. So this is the last bit of that definition. It's not just where you operate, where they operate, also sources from, provides goods and services too. So when we think about value chain targets, these are water targets that are addressing across the board, different stages of the value chain. Where are the highest water risks and impacts, not just within your own facilities, but is it upstream within agricultural supplies? Is it downstream within, for example, consumer goods? These are different stages, and targeting those, it can be a little bit trickier in terms of collecting information. But as we'll talk about more, there's a lot of benefits to really trying to unpack that. So value chain targets definitely cast a wider net when it comes to prioritizing geographies, for example, looking at key supplier regions, whether or not perhaps there's an operational facility there. And value chain targets are or tend to be an order of magnitude broader in scope than operational targets. And as we'll see in the next slide, many businesses operate in sectors where value chain targets are important because most of the water use doesn't happen within the four walls of a facility. So we can go for a few different examples, but essentially the real driving force, why should businesses be setting value chain targets? It's because for most sectors, value chain targets are necessary because most of the water usage doesn't actually lie within the facilities or the direct operations. Most of that water usage lies within the value chain. And that's why we need to be looking at more ways to set value chain targets, because this is where the water is used. If that's where it's used, that's where the risks are, that's where the impacts are, and that's where the opportunities are. That's where we need to be making change in order to get to a more comfortable state than we are in right now. As a few different examples of where is water used in value chains, think about agricultural commodity producers, livestock, dairy, food and beverage industry, right? Any industry with a big basis in agriculture, regardless of where they sit, much of the water used across that value chain is going to be way upstream in the farms, essentially. It's going to be for growing the crops that then go into these products later on. So, and agriculture is easily, far and away, the largest water user in the world, if you look at it by sector relative to industrial and domestic. So ag is definitely one big player here. Another angle that you can think about, though, is water involved in energy. So water energy nexus, the water required to cool power plants, water required for hydropower, it doesn't matter whether it's coal or other types of cooling, but just the cooling mechanisms required for the energy production. As we increasingly require more energy to run our communities, our lives, our economies, as that energy demand has grown and will continue to grow, that does require cooling. So there's cooling embedded in there. And you can think about all of the things that rely upon this energy that are really sitting on top of that. And again, this is a place where the value chain targets are important because you may not think right away that, like, say, electronics and technology have that large water cost right away, but they are reliant upon further upstream certain energy costs. Another example, consumer goods, household appliances, domestic water use within the home. This is something that many businesses, it's not within the core of their facility, but if they're providing textiles or clothing that's being washed in the home, if they have appliances that are needed further down the line of a consumer's product life cycle, right? That water consumption may be happening in the home. So that's where the water is getting used as opposed to facilities. Finally, you can think about mining, something that really underpins and is really far upstream of a lot of different businesses. So there's a lot of different angles you can take on it, but in the end, many businesses and many sectors, the main water use is not happening within their four walls. If it's not happening within their four walls, we need to be thinking about other resources to make available for businesses to tackle a wider range of water-related issues. All right, so we're going to jump forward and we're going to do a round of introductions for our panelists. I'm just going to call on this order, and it'd be great if you would just take an opportunity to introduce yourself and your role and position, and then we'll get into the panel. So starting with Simon.
Thanks a lot, Colin, and hi everyone. It's a pleasure to be with you this morning on such an interesting topic, I would say. So I'll start by introducing Quantis and then myself in the organization. So starting with Quantis, we partner with leading global organizations that are quite serious about reducing the environmental impacts in key sectors. And so we try to combine sustainability expertise with strategic business knowledge to help companies align with their planetary boundaries. So on my side, I've been working with many clients on how to set targets on nature and more precisely on water issues, so both quantity and quality. And finally, I'm actively participating in the development of the SBTN framework and the science-based target for water method.
Great, thanks. And Neha?
Was I muted?
Oh, yeah, you were. Sorry, I thought I was muted. Neha, thanks.
Yeah, I just realized. Okay, good morning, everyone. Thank you, Colin, for the wonderful introduction and happy to be here. Hi everyone, I'm Neha. I'm working as Sustainability Development Leader, working for IKEA, focusing on the water agenda and responsible for creating the narrative and row forward for IKEA range and supply. For those of you who don't know IKEA is a Swedish retail chain selling home furnishing products, everything that you can find at a home. And our value chain is quite complex because we sell all kind of products and we go back into the value chain in terms of everything that Colin spoke about, from textiles to products that are used at home. Yeah.
All right, Manvita.
Yeah, so nice to meet you all. Great to be here. I'm Vita. I work as a sustainable sourcing manager for Mars Food. So I'm responsible for all of our sustainability areas on environmental and social responsibility in upstream supply chains. And Mars Food is a segment of Mars Incorporated, which is a family-owned business in the food sector. So there's two more divisions: Mars Wrigley Confectionery with chocolate and sugar products and pet care products. And in food, we are headquartered in London with about 1,500 associates. And our ambition is to provide consumers with meals that are healthy, easy, affordable, and of course, delicious. And our portfolio consists of rice, sauces, and condiments.
Great, thank you. And Truca.
Yes, hi everyone. I'm Truca Smoor. I'm the Global Sustainability Director for Cargill. So Cargill is a company, a global agricultural and food ingredients company. We have over 150,000 employees. We have been around for over 155 years. And we work in 70 countries. So what we do is connecting farmers with markets, but also our customers with the food and feed ingredients. And really our purpose is to nourish the world in a safe, responsible, and sustainable way. And so I think our topic today is very exciting for me because of the importance of how we connect across the value chain.
Great, and thanks a lot to all of you panelists for being here. We're just going to jump right in. So starting with a question for Simon. There are a lot of tools, data, and methods to get started with enterprise target setting. Can you briefly describe the latest trends in corporate water stewardship targets? And the question here also is that, are there sufficient resources for businesses to get started? What would that look like?
Thanks, Colin. Just before even mentioning the available frameworks and data, I would also like to recall that we are witnessing severe alteration of the water cycles, such as, for example, the green water cycle, the 6 planetary boundaries that has already been transgressed. And it's just another example of why it's beginning to be more and more urgent to align with planetary boundaries on water, not only on the operations for companies, but also across the overall value chain. This said, there are indeed many frameworks that exist nowadays to help companies on their sustainable journey on water, whether they are experienced or only starting on the subject and on their journey. It's funny because it was popular to say that the water community was kind of divided between all the frameworks and data that exist in the topic. But in the end, what we see is that most of them aim at the same goals. So whether we use the SBTN or the TNFD or water or enterprise water targets from the CEO water mandate, we can see that in fact each one of them is going in the same direction. So if I simplify quite quickly, for example, the first step would be to map overall on the value chain what is material and on quantity and quality issues. And so here, as you said, Colin, in introduction, we will mostly see that raw materials in the upstream value chain and purchases will be most material for most companies. But whenever we have consumer goods or a use phase that is intensive in terms of water, it can be the downstream part. The second pillar would be analyzing risks accordingly, such as whenever I'm already mapping all the value chain, I can analyze where there is a high depletion of the resources, where I have a lot of scarcity, for example. And then in the third time, so depending on the framework, developing more or less contextual water targets, depending also on the maturity of the company. And so we can see that most of the framework aim at these three pillars in general, and that in the end, it's all kind of depends on the maturity of the subject. So there's a lot of data also that is available to answer these three steps. I can start with aqueduct, for example, the water gap, to quote some, but also many scientific literature and hydrological models that are available to help setting targets at the basin level. To really conclude, and I really want to stress that, what really differs is not necessarily the data or the framework, but rather the depth of analysis and the ambition of the company. And here, it all starts, in fact, with a company understanding it has impacts and dependencies on water, and hence physical, regulatory, and reputational risks.
Great, thank you. And I think that's a really good point that you're sharing on. There's a lot out there, but a lot of it ends up coming back to how in depth do you mean to go, right? You may start off piecemeal or smaller and get larger and larger as you get more ambition, more capacity, and all of that. I think that's a really good point. And I will just remind our audience members that please drop any questions for our panelists. We will be having open participant questions for the panelists. Please drop those into the Pathable chat, not the Zoom chat. Okay, so shifting over to Neha. So navigating these tools, data, and methods for complex value chains can be quite an ask. For businesses with complex value chains, what are the challenges in setting enterprise water targets across that value chain?
Thanks, Colin. That's a very apt question. Water is a dynamic and complex resource that interacts within and across each stage of IKEA's value chain, amplifying the difficulty of creating common targets and metric for it. So in the value chain, what adds another layer of complexity is that water is interconnected to other issues like energy and biodiversity and does not operate in isolation. At IKEA, we have an ambition towards water positive. And as mentioned in our People and Planet Positive strategy, by 2030, we will prioritize being good water stewards and contributing to increasing the availability of clean water in our operations and our supply chain. And in order to bring this vision to practice, building on to what Simon said, there's a need for framework and measuring and reporting the progress. But there are many frameworks available. The indicators are existing alongside emerging approaches of relevance, some of them referred by Simon. However, the challenge is to find the apt framework with indicators where there are tangible opportunities to adapt to different parts of the value chain, upstream as well as downstream, which has universal applicability and can help in moving in the relevant local context to the corporate level. That shift, that is the biggest challenge, that how do we find the right one that fits into the complexity of the supply chain? One of the other key challenge that we have is getting around the right data for the relevant part of the value chain for all geographies we operate in, more than 50 geographies, and varied type of materials ranging from food and fibers at one side to minerals and others at the other. Adding to it, prioritizing within a part or across the value chain that responds to the local context, not only based on the risks assessment for today, but how do we factor in the future too? So last but not the least, we also have to determine what specific actions are needed to meet these targets at the prioritized locations, keeping in mind its impacts now and the possibility of scaling or replicating at other locations. So here I've tried to mention some of the challenges, and yeah.
Great, thanks. And yeah, actually, so your point about having the right data and how that can be tough with different types of possibly products or commodities. I've definitely encountered that in my own work. If a business is doing let's say, full supply chain risk assessment or value chain risk assessment of a small number of products or products that are easily translatable between each other, that can be fairly straightforward. But then when it's many different types of products which aren't even necessarily comparable in a lot of different ways, it can definitely add to that complexity. So I've encountered that myself in my own work. All right, so keeping on a similar theme, here we go. Vita, so the best way is to start essentially, to start the process, start with what is available and improve from learning and by doing. Mars is another company with a complex value chain. How do you improve your sustainability program through learning by doing? What lessons could you possibly share?
Right. So, as Simon said, having the materiality assessment really helps to pinpoint where we should focus. And that goes not just for the strategy itself, but also for which data we should prioritize in collecting. And of course, same as most of the companies here, most of our impact in water, but in other areas is in the upstream value chains, and especially on farm and for the food business, especially in rice farming, because rice is one of the most material, the very most material ingredient that enters our products. So we have two types of data that we need to come together to be able to calculate our impact and then help us make the right strategic decisions. One is to know what we're buying and from where to have the traceability of our rice sourcing to a very precise location and to know how much we sourced from where. And the second one, what impact per ton is each of those individual supply chains making, right? So I sit on the procurement team. So within procurement team, we focus our efforts on getting the traceability data and the volumes, and then we cooperate with our corporate sustainability team, which has life cycle assessment experts, and of course we cooperate also with third parties like Quantis to define what is then the impact factor per ton of material sourced. And that one is quite tricky, right? That can be often more tricky than just knowing where your rice or whatever else you're buying is coming from. And there, I think it's really important to start with what you can get. So there's plenty of life cycle assessment databases that are really starting point. We also use scientific literature where we know that the study group is similar to our farmer group. It's the same location, it's the same methodology that we would apply to calculating our water targets. And from there, we're gradually moving to supplier-specific impact factors and on-farm measurements. The right verification approaches so that we make sure that our data is still credible. And that way, you can really prioritize where it makes sense to have this higher precision data and where you can still afford to use database data. So you can really make a plan that works for you and for the resources you have.
Great, thanks. And I guess we've done a fair amount of just laying out what's out there, what types of data, what type of things can be learned from it. But I guess pivoting a little bit. Yeah. So shifting over to Truka. Even the first step still transforms your business in a positive way. What do you see as the main opportunities, particularly since you set your value chain water targets over a year ago? And if you feel free to share challenges as well, but I think we've hit a few challenges. So I'm definitely interested in your take on opportunities and lessons.
Yeah, I can echo a lot of what the previous participants said around the challenges of getting the right data and the challenges of setting these targets and the importance of understanding the traceability and the impact in the supply chain. I think what has been key as part of Cargo's journey is on one hand the need to prioritize our action, because with any company, no matter how large or how small, it's like we have to prioritize. You cannot do it alone and you cannot solve it all. But with having said that, this is like it's a very, very critical issue. And we very much realize like we have to take action. And so this prioritization and understanding our value chain impact helps to prioritize. And then as a result, what you see is once you go through that step of prioritization, you see that like these goals, these commitments actually get embraced by these local teams. So I think what has been really transformational for us is that we create that local ownership. This is no longer, it's a cargo-wide commitment, but where this lives and where this ownership takes shape is in these local communities, whether we talk to farmers in Mexico or ranchers in North America that are working on grassland restoration, or growers in Brazil that are looking at riverbanks, or communities in India that we are helping to improve with access to sanitation and safe drinking water. It's really about that local context that makes that we can shape these programs to become more relevant. And I think that is also for me a very motivating message, because once you talk to these local teams, they want to do this. They see the need and they want to advance, and they're very motivated to actually achieve these targets. And I think where we have to keep that flexibility and keep learning is how do we tailor our goals and commitments to create that local ownership, whether that's in our operations or in our value chain.
Great, thanks. That's a really helpful point just in terms of getting that local uptake. I know that can be a challenge, but where that's successful, it seems like it really makes the targets and the implementation of the targets take off. And of course, in the end, that's what the targets are all about, are trying to drive certain types of activities and actions which will actually make a difference on the ground. So thanks for that. Less targeted questions here. We can do a little bit more open floor from our panelists in terms of responses. I'm happy to get multiple responses. So I'll start with a simple one. Why do you think, we've covered a lot of the questions, the challenges, opportunities, but why do you think that that businesses need to why do you think that businesses need to tackle the shared water challenges across the value chain?
I'm happy to take a first step because I think there's a very obvious answer. And I think like anyone who has seen any news outlet in the coming months, I think everyone has his local story. His local story, or even not even your news outlet. For my personal story is I'm based in the Netherlands. I actually live below sea level. The news recently has been totally swamped with the droughts that we're facing here, rivers running dry, or at least like historically low levels. And only 2 weeks ago, we got to the point where you see your street flooded because of the massive downpour that we had with the weather change. And I think this is my personal story, but I feel we are getting to a stage that everyone, wherever you are in the world, you will know, you either have read a story or you have a personal story where you're confronted with like the challenges that we're facing related to water. And there is like the change we're seeing is not by anywhere near enough to actually move into the direction where we need to go. And I feel like that level of urgency that we are seeing with the need for climate adaptation, the need to adapt to these more extreme weather patterns it's becoming so urgent, and that we have to take this action, and water is core to that.
I'm happy to complete all that, given I couldn't agree more with what you just said, Trucker. And I would say that for some companies with really complex value chain, it's even harder to have a full traceability of the overall supply chain and trace what is the farm, for example, on farm level. So here we are lucky to have many companies that are experienced in this exercise and know exactly the farm level and the origin of the raw materials, for example. But for some other companies, having after tier 1 suppliers can be really, really complex and hard. And so they only know the tier 1 suppliers and they don't know the exact origin, for example, the raw materials that are purchases, given they could have 3, 4, 5 suppliers in the overall value chain that transform all of these materials. And so here, having an overall understanding of the shared water challenge across the overall value chain helps also engage these suppliers and work locally to go back with what Tuke just mentioned. And this is what exactly we need to do. We need to address. Even we can educate many suppliers that are not really aware that most of them clients, in fact, expect them to improve their water targets, or maybe even to set water targets themselves.
I'll just add up to what has already been said. Very inspiring and touching points shared by you, Truke. Building on to what Colin introduced in the beginning, giving a description about the value chain. And while I shared about the challenges, what are there, I still believe it is very important to go beyond operations and work on the value chain perspective, because it's important to do things where the impact is most, right? So what we usually see, the tip of the iceberg is not where all the actions are there, right? So we need to see the full iceberg and identify, like you mentioned, Vita, understand the materiality, understand which are the most important places, and that actually happens within the value chain. So it's important to go beyond in our vision, to see, not close our eyes to it, understand, and the way you shared, Vita, important to prioritize. The way we can prioritize is different. It could be based on the knowledge that we already have, so but going throughout the value chain is the most important, in order to make the small steps. Even a small step in that direction is needed, because small step taken today is what is going to give us results. We can't wait and just limit to operations to be able to see bigger results in the future.
And I think to conclude, you see, sorry, that it's amazing. There's so many passionate individuals, right, working at all the companies, and companies are making commitments. But if you think about it as a business, it's also a smart business decision. And on two fronts, right? Because as you see, everybody is now, as Truke said, everybody's experiencing this personally. And consumers and customers will start asking the question, right? What are you doing on the water? They see it on the news, they experience it, and this pressure will be mounting more in the future for sure. So it's important as well to be prepared just to protect the business. And the second one is, you can expect genuine supply chain disruptions because of water risk and climate change risk. So you might not be able to source what you're sourcing now, not even in 20 years. Now, I think we're talking in the next year even, given how drought has affected many regions already in the past 2 years. So it's really a smart business decision as well to invest in water stewardship. And because it's something you're going to do on your own, you have to invest as well in the outreach and engagement with other actors in the shared supply chains.
Great, thanks. Yeah, and that's always, I feel like we're getting into a balance I've encountered before of essentially, I feel like water is one of those areas where we can talk about the future, and we have sense and we have data that informs us that some of these issues may be getting worse, but also it doesn't feel like a far off issue, right? We have water issues now. You don't have to look very far. I'm over here, the West Coast of the US. We constantly have wildfire season. We're in wildfire season again this year. So yeah, everyone has one of these, and everyone has one of these now. You don't have to look too far into the future in order to be trying to make predictions about, what will this look like. We can just look around ourselves. And I think that's a useful point. So pivoting a little bit, when do you think enterprise water targets across the value chain will become common practice? And if you don't want to make a prediction about when do you think that will become common practice, because right now it certainly isn't. It's becoming more common, and organizations like ours are definitely pushing to have more value chain style targets. But when do you think that will become more common, or what do you think are the barriers that are stopping it from becoming more commonplace?
I would say that it'll come faster than we think, to be honest. Just to mention an example, here in Europe, there was a regulatory measure that has been taken at the Europe level, that is the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, so CSRD. And just to mention this as an example, for example, it asks every company to disclose what they actually do on nature and of course on water, including water, and if they do something to justify it. Meaning that here we are expecting companies to be prepared to set targets on all the value chain and not only their operations, and to start working closely with the suppliers to ensure the reduction of such consumptions and pollutants overall. And so this is just an example of regulatory risk, I would say, that we have right now. And we also have physical risks and reputational ones that are very important here when it comes to many companies with water issues. And so just by kind of understanding that these companies have these risks, to repeat what Vita said, investing in water stewardship is very clever and smart today, given we expect to anticipate these physical risks, for example, this drought, and we can see them right now. And so just to mention these three main risks, this basically make a company set more and more targets on water.
Maybe to build on that, I think as well, the pressure that has started to build about carbon a bit earlier is going to help indeed speed this up, as I agree with Simon, it's probably coming quite soon. And you can see that people will realize climate change and water risks are interlinked, so it will start making sense to just set targets across both rather than only science-based targets for greenhouse gas reduction. I think the biggest challenge is perhaps education. I think water might feel more complex. So I think it's important to help upscale not just business, but also policymakers and build this engagement and really a water stewardship consortium that has actors from different areas to help share knowledge as well. I think there's not enough sharing of knowledge between different actors and different projects that are very good, but there's not so much outreach. So I think that would be important to help align and really drive action.
Yeah, I can build on that, Vita. When I think the importance of understanding the impact across the value chain could not be underestimated. And I think that is what you see recognized in policies, like the number of policies that are still focusing on operations and about recycling. And then it is very important that we understand our own direct footprint and that we reduce those impacts. But if you look at the scale of the impact that we can achieve by acting in the full value chain, whether that's upstream or downstream, that is where the real scale will happen. And that is, I think, what is so critical, is to get to that scalable need. And I also agree with what Simon said, where he says there is one of the challenges for many companies is that complexity of that supply chain. It's also for cargoes, like knowing what you originate from where is a difficult question. And so there's new tools, like the aqueduct food tool is one of the tools that's been developed to help companies also to look at, like, even if you don't know exactly where you originate, like there are tools becoming available that actually help understand that impact. And this is where I almost would like to do, like, for I think it would be great if more companies that make public commitments towards like incorporating their value chain. But I would almost stress is like, start with taking action, start with understanding that value chain. Maybe a company isn't ready yet to make a public commitment, but even engaging across your value chain, understanding your impact, look at where your hotspots are, and then reaching out to these suppliers or these downstream customers and think about how you can work together and explore what a target would mean. And then maybe it's not a public commitment yet, but I think shifting towards this is where I will take action is very important. And then hopefully over time, more and more companies will work together and see that these value chain impacts are intrinsically shared impacts because they are outside of your own boundaries. And because they are shared, you get an incentive to actually work together, which also makes that we can leverage each other's skill set. Like we love to work with our customers in leveraging what we have learned from our origination and our supply chain, but also our actions to drive that change. So I hope that by more companies actually like starting that on that journey, whether they make their commitments or not. Of course, I would like to see more companies making commitments, but in the end, it's about like, how can we drive the action that is needed to actually get us there and start towards thinking in that with that value chain approach.
Thanks, Truca. And actually, if I think back to a lot of the lessons from the contextual water target work, which definitely went into trying to develop a rigorous process that could be performed at a site level, but also you can think about the enterprise level work. One of the big lessons and findings of that was that it can be difficult to do for one business to do all of it, but also the more they engage with others, the more they get the answers to these questions. And even more so, I think it was useful to learn through that process that the more businesses and the more actors that do these, the more that information then becomes easier to access. And once that information becomes easier to access, that can kind of snowball on itself. And then that makes it easier to set the targets once more targets are already set, things like that. So I think that that is definitely, that's sort of a snowball effect that I've encountered and seen in more of the contextual water target space. And I do think is applicable for the value chain target space, because, you know, if one of, let's say, if one of Cargill's partners were to set a value chain target, it would certainly be easier for them now that you have done so, right? And they can definitely work with you to understand more. So I think that's a good point. And I'll also say that you jumped right into our last question of, if there was a beginning company, what would you tell a business that's still deciding, you know, what are the first steps to take? What would you say to that business? I feel like you already covered that, but if you have any more to say, feel free to add. Otherwise, our other panelists can jump in too.
And I will keep this very short to give others some time to respond, but I will just say, start with what you know. Like when you open the tap, there's no water. When your farmers are running out, you know where to start. So don't wait until you have the perfect data and get stuck in analysis.
Thank you, Truca. You know, very short and sweet and the right one. Yeah. So I would like to say that's very inspiring. Here I would like to quote from our founder, Ingvar Kamprad, simplicity and common sense should characterize planning and strategic direction. So yeah. Looking back, though we realized from our value chain, you know, full analysis, data analysis perspective in 2019 that material is the biggest contributor and cotton is contributing 52%, while full material is 74% in our value chain. And we are still on a journey to set targets and where there are certain challenges. But we started taking the action way back in 2007 when we learned, you know, based on our limited knowledge, that we should, you know, cotton is a big contributor and we should start working on it. And we moved towards cotton from more sustainable sources way back in 2015, where we reduced our water consumption by 20%. So just to add on to it, that building on to what Truca said previously also, that one is a separate thing of creating targets and communicating it, right? With that, while that task is ongoing, take small steps of what you know, where your impact lies, you know, where you can make a difference in the value chain and take it, right? So this will lead a long way.
Yeah, absolutely agree with both Truca and Neha. I think really think of the North Star as well, right? What is your ultimate goal if you're getting lost in the detail? So really think, is the decision you're making helping you achieve your, of course, short-term financial results without compromising what you want for the world and for your ambition tomorrow? And let that guide your choice and practically really take it step by step. It's and engage others, ask for help, be open. So make sure that you're being friendly, you're being cooperative, and don't fuss so much about being perfect at the beginning, because you can just capture what are the limitations, the learnings, and define the steps. So it's more important to take some action now than to wait until you have the perfect plan, because anyways, you have to change it all the time.
Yeah, I have you know, don't wait till you have the perfect data, because I have yet to encounter the perfect data. So we'll still just be waiting.
Yes, and just to add something on that, to also kind of bring back what I mentioned in the introduction, but there are many frameworks and they are adapted for any companies that is mature or not, depending on their maturity on the subject, depending on their experience on the subject, they can start the journey. And this is really what is important here, is that every company, depending on the maturity, will have what they want, basically the information and the data that they can use. So it's really a matter of education in terms of company understanding what are the risks, what are the ambition you want to have for your company, and as I would say as a conclusion, don't miss the train, in fact, because it's going quite fast, and I think many of these risks are happening today, and they will continue to happen in the future.
Thanks. And I do think that's a great note to end on. You know, please don't miss the train. Those businesses out there should definitely be looking at what they can do to take the first steps if they have not already. We will now open up for participants. If you want to ask questions, feel free to drop something in the chat. You're also free to raise your hand. If you raise your hand, and then you can come off mute and ask directly. We're kind of open for whatever formats people prefer. We do have one question in the Pathable chat. So, and I'll just pitch this to the panel. For businesses where a value chain is less driven by ag, in ag, water is important, it's widely acknowledged. Have you been able to, how to prioritize water as highly as other nature topics, such as waste? I think we all know carbon. Anyone want to take that? So how do you prioritize water more highly if you're not in the ag space?
I can take one stab at that, having worked in a chemicals company and across other sectors as well. And I think from my past experience, what you see is there's, and this is also actually what we baked into our analysis of the targets together with our partnership with the World Resources Institute. It's about impacts, dependencies, and ability to drive change. And when that dependency on water, even if you're not in agriculture, you probably, if you're a manufacturing facility or whether you're in a mining industry or like in many sectors, still have that dependency and will still face the outcomes of inadequate watershed health. And this is where engagement through collective action is a next step. So an example is the Water Resilience Coalition, which is a group of leading companies that says that we recognize that there is a next level beyond just reducing your own footprint to move towards how can we drive the scalable collective action to address these watershed issues. And I think that is where that can be a starting point to really look at like that dependency, and then also what will happen if that risk that you're facing is not addressed, because you will see that the moment that you're running out of water, when you have to start trucking in water to an operational facility, that is when very, very fast different parts of your organization will start to raise the issue of saying, we have to do something around this because this gets very expensive.
Absolutely. Do any other panelists want to jump in?
Yeah, sure. To react on that, in fact, we often expect that for most of when we talk about impacts, whether it is on climate change, on water, on land, in fact, we often expect that it's direct, but most of them is quite indirect and it is upstream. So for the agriculture sector, it's true that it's very direct to see this water impact that we have and this dependency that we have for the culture of the commodities. But if I take the example of the chemical or pharmaceutical industry, it would be in the manufacturing process with all the solvents, for example, when a lot of water is needed. If I take the textile one, it's going to be related to commodities with cotton, for example. It's going to be in the end use phase with the use phase of the consumer that will wash the textile, as Colin said in introduction. In any sector, in fact, in any key sectors, we see that there are dependencies across the value chain, and that it's just that it's a bit upstream or a bit indirect, and so that's why it can be sometimes not really obvious for the company, but it is there, and there is a dependency that is in the value chain.
I would like to just build on to what Simon said, that I completely agree that, in different type of products, right? So just to share that from an IKEA perspective, we have product use where we have just looked at the range, the taps and showers that we sell, the appliances that we sell, as an example, that also has a big impact, and we are trying to measure that. And it is a big contributor. Almost 15% of our value chain comes from it. So other are operations where, we are trying to understand, other than water use, it is also water quality through the discharge that is happening. So there are a lot of impacts, specific, they are different for different parts of value chain. And I think that is the most important part, building on to what Vita said in the beginning, that materiality is important, understanding a value chain, when you need to go deep, when you need to go wide, right? So within a certain part of value chain, what are the real impacts, understanding them, finding which are the material ones, and finding how and where to act on them.
Great, thank you.
We had one hand from Naresh, actually, for a question.
Yeah, Naresh, I saw that you dropped a question in the chat as well. It's the same question. Thanks for being patient.
So
please go ahead.
So my question was really about, I think we talked about effective collaboration with the value chain, in particular, like, suppliers. So I was curious, if you can, if the panelists can talk about, some specific, like, some guidance or, maybe some examples, what are some of the best ways, to collaborate, so because that could be a challenging part of the process.
Yeah, maybe I can take a step at that one. I think it really depends on the relationship, and the relationship with the supplier is really important. And understanding where they're coming from and what their priorities are. And the first point is really to create an engagement and the shared sense of purpose. So they see it as a challenge that has to be addressed jointly. That's the first step, right? Getting the commitment and the interest. And then if there's a lack of capability, skills, finances, you build a supporting network and you leverage the strengths of each of the companies to get what you need. So typically for our programs, we don't know everything. Our suppliers don't know everything. So we build a network where we work with civil society, with often our peers or their peers, to create a bigger scale. And if financing is an issue, there is a lot of programs and support that you can leverage to help fund some of the initiatives. You can get the development agencies to support. In agriculture, agronomist networks and agronomist consultants are very important, hydrological consultants. So all of the practicalities can be addressed as long as you agree that both you and the supplier want to work on it. And then the rest can follow. So it's really about investing in the relationship and building this shared purpose.
And I'll just chime in here with a separate example I've encountered in our work. We were working with a business that was setting a facility target, but mostly trying to engage with the supply chain around the facility. And they didn't really know right away what was going on. But once they started asking questions, they actually discovered very quickly that a collective action stakeholder group to improve water management was being developed at the time of looking for this. So they started asking around, they figured out there was a stakeholder engagement group doing precisely what they wanted to do. And that was an example of really, you need to start asking questions in order to actually start figuring out what is possible, what isn't possible. And I think that the best thing to do is for businesses to start exploring those opportunities. And sometimes there may not be quite as much on the other end, but you're never going to figure out unless you start.
I think I agree with everything that has been said. I think one element I'd like to stress is really start with what you know, but also start with what your core strengths are of your company. I love the example from Nea from IKEA, where it says like, well, we can influence what we put in our stores, and we can help like focus on what reducing showers. And with that, that's a core business of IKEA to actually help their customers with their downstream impact. This is for Cargill, like how we build these actions is around like where's our core business? Part of that is the origination of agricultural ingredients, so we can leverage our farmer network to actually engage farmers in saying how they can help and how they can implement practices that make these supply chains more resilient. But I think that is a very critical part of driving that action, is looking with what you know, but also where your strengths are as a company, and starting from there and see where you can engage. And then from there, go step by step towards the point where you can really connect the dots.
Great, thanks. All right, we have one more question coming in the chat. Industries are focused nearly solely on reducing carbon emissions. What have been the main selling points that have helped you reassess this focus to also encompass water management policies and targets? So yeah, how to work with carbon targets, the focus of carbon within businesses, and how that has expanded to water. What has driven that?
Yeah, that's, in my opinion, a very interesting question. So thanks for that, Maria, to having this question, given this is something I really try to address whenever I'm also talking with companies, is the fact that whenever we talk about water, we cannot take it as a silo, as only one issue, given there are many relations with other environmental issues. And this is the core, I would say, and fundamental of the concept of planetary boundaries, is that whenever we talk about planetary boundaries, we see issues and impacts as a whole. So not only water isolated, not only climate isolated, but as a whole. And we see that there are dependencies and interconnections, I would say, between such issues. So here, having a strong target and strong strategy on climate change is great. It's a good start, but it doesn't mean that you won't have any shift and if any more impact on water. It means that you have to address both at the same time. You have to address it as a whole, and this is why there's the framework that's called science-based target on nature, but also TNFD, which is basically on nature, and we speak at that as nature, given we cannot take it separated. Otherwise, we avoid a shift of the burden, and so this is one of the main problems.
I would like to share my reflections over it. Quite agree to very interesting question, I would say. Internally, I think most of us realize it. I realized it when I started this role, that there's more and more focus on carbon, and that has picked up, right? And more topics are coming up, especially now biodiversity is coming up, and water has not gained that sort of an attention probably that it should have, right? I personally feel that it is important to keep on creating awareness, keep on sharing the knowledge, bringing it as a risk internally within the organization also, and a sense of urgency to have more stakeholders on board, to have these collective actions. It is very important, and there's a lot of expectations, to the external, CIVI as an having World Water Week as a platform where more and more things are discussed, having these platforms where more discussions happen, where people share their concerns, and having examples, coming up. So these are important things that are going to be needed to create that energy, to get attention towards the most important topic, water, that we are talking about here.
I would just also like to add that there are synergies. Whenever we have a target on both, for example, biodiversity, on land use change, on water, we can witness that there are many synergies between the action that we can take to reach these targets. And so this is also another example of why we really need to address that as a whole and to have a comprehensive framework, given the reduction to reach the water target can sometimes be related also to reduction to reach a land target. And so this is really, really important for the company to know.
Yeah, so absolutely. I think that increasingly, as there's more and more understanding, I think that the climate and the water world are likely starting to overlap more and more. WRI has definitely been doing more work in the water resilience space. And of course, climate is one of the large drivers of many of our water-related issues. So there's certainly overlaps. And I think as we develop more understanding, standardization, and processes, hopefully these targets will continue to align and have more and more co-benefits as well in delivering upon, say, a water target. You may actually get some carbon gains and vice versa. And when and where we can try and push those synergies, that can be very helpful. I will also just shortly add, because we haven't touched upon it as much today, I do generally see a lot of businesses getting the pressure or interest from investors. And I think that as investors become increasingly aware of the types of water risks that can happen within their portfolios, you definitely see that move down. And investors are not quite as savvy yet on water as they are on carbon, but that is also catching up quickly. So that's another driving force that we've encountered. Just in terms of time, we are at time. Thank you very much for the panelists for all of your contributions. We would give you a round of applause if we were in person. For those of you in the audience and on the panel going to World Water Week, hoping to see you in person next week as well. So thanks a lot. And I'm going to pass it back to you, Nanda.
Thanks so much, Colin. Give me 1 second. I'm going to move back to my pin. So I hope you enjoy listening to the panelists regarding what they have done, what their learnings and everything else. I know that you might be a little bit overwhelmed with all the information that we have given you, but please do not worry. This is the first step. The next sessions are going to really go deep dive into how Cargill and P&G set their water targets, what their learnings along the journey, and what has been transformed in their businesses. So we are going to go through that. And then after that, we will start with the actual technical details of what the enterprise water target setting across the value chains are and what are the different tools that you can use you're going to actually practice. So please make sure you download the Excel file that I have provided you in the chat. You're going to need the Excel file to do the practice exercise. And then if you want to, listen to everybody while you're also reading the slides, I have also given you the link to download the slides as well. So please make sure you download all the documents that you need to actually be prepared on the next steps that we're going to do. For the next session, we will first start with a presentation from Shannon Quinn, who is working for Procter & Gamble. She has worked with WRI very closely to develop the enterprise target for P&G. And she's going to talk about how the whole journey looked like and what the learning so far for her. So I will play the video recording of Shannon because it's late in the midnight for Shannon today. She's based in the US, so I'm just gonna play the video that she provided, and she's also gonna be attending the World Water Week in person. So if you see Shannon at the World Water Week, feel free to ask questions.
Thanks for joining our session today. I'm Shannon Quinn, P&G's Global Water Stewardship Leader, and I'm excited to be here with you today to share P&G's motivation and our experience with creating downstream water targets as part of our holistic water strategy. P&G operates in 70 countries, and we sell our consumer product brands across more than 180, serving 5 billion people every single day.
Sorry, guys, I realized I'm playing without sharing the sound, so I have to share the sound. Nathan, would you be able to help?
Yeah, so whenever you go to share your screen initially, there'll be like a little checkbox in the bottom left corner. It should say share computer audio.
Gotcha. All right. So apologize for that, everyone.
You're fine.
Yeah.
It was working for one moment.
Okay. Let me go back.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining our session today. I'm Shannon Quinn, P&G's Global Water Stewardship Leader, and I'm excited to be here with you today to share P&G's motivation and our experience with creating downstream water targets as part of our holistic water strategy. P&G operates in 70 countries, and we sell our consumer product brands across more than 180, serving 5 billion people every single day. Brands like Dawn, Fairy, Ariel, Head & Shoulders, and Crest are household staples. And besides being trusted brands found in millions of homes around the world, there's another thing that our brands have in common, and that is water. All of our operations require water to make products, and 70% of P&G products need water to be used. This makes water essential to our business, and it's a key motivation for including water as a focus area for our Ambition 2030 sustainability efforts. For decades, P&G has focused on reducing water use in manufacturing facilities. And in 2015, a company-wide life cycle assessment resulted in a key insight about where water is being used across the life cycle of P&G products. That was that 96% of water withdrawals are occurring during the consumer use of our products. This uncovered the opportunity to expand our strategy beyond the four walls of our manufacturing facilities and into consumer homes and key areas around the world experiencing water stress. Today, we have a holistic strategy called our Water Positive Future strategy, which includes continued efforts to reduce water use during manufacturing and new efforts to restore water in water-stressed areas and to respond to water challenges through innovation and partnership. During the development of our strategy, we really wanted to focus on developing quantitative water targets that would address the water quantity impacts related to P&G manufacturing and to the downstream consumer water consumption occurring during the use of our products. We worked with WRI to follow the steps of the enterprise water target setting guidance, and we determined that we wanted to move forward with deriving volumetric targets. Best practices were used to set the volumetric targets that were associated with P&G manufacturing facility consumption, but downstream volumetric targets for consumer products had not been developed before. So we worked with WRI to develop a new method for estimating the total water consumption during product use in 18 water stress basins around the world. This new methodology will be published. You can see all of the details in October 2022. Our target setting process led to two new quantitative water targets announced as part of our Water Positive Future strategy released this past June. And these targets are to restore more water than is consumed at P&G manufacturing sites located in 18 water-stressed areas around the world, and to restore more water than is consumed during the use of our products in metropolitan areas of Los Angeles and Mexico City, two high water-stressed areas. And we're doing this, we're really focusing on 18 as we said, 18 priority basins, 18 water-stressed areas across 7 different countries in the world. Please contact me if any of these seem to overlap with where you are also focused. Would love to learn a little bit more and see how we might be able to work together. But the way that we're moving these targets forward and the way that we will deliver upon these targets is by working with partners in these areas to support on-the-ground restoration projects that provide water volume benefit greater than the volume target that we've set for each of the 18 water-stressed areas in scope for our targets. Water restoration projects can come in many different forms and with many different benefits beyond volume. We created a short animation to help a broader audience understand how our targets will come to life and how they will have a positive impact across the 18 areas. I'm going to play that video now.
The water crisis looks different across the world. While some of us don't see it yet, others see it every day. At P&G, we are restoring water in 18 water-stressed areas where we work because we know it's where we can make the biggest difference. We do this by working with people on the ground who have a deep knowledge of local challenges and solutions to support long-term projects that improve, manage, or protect freshwater resources. So what can restoring water look like? Here are a few examples. In some places, there is not enough water to support both people and nature year-round. Here, the restoration of water can include increasing stream flow in local waterways or recharging groundwater supplies. Where the water quality is less than it should be, the solutions could include reforestation to help reduce runoff into local water bodies, and restoring natural wetlands to filter and clean water back to a healthy state. When water access is the challenge, solutions can include digging wells for local communities or connecting homes to safe water systems. While there is no single solution, the benefits of each project go beyond the drops of water. The positive impacts of one project ripples across ecosystems for people, nature, and wildlife. We want to help build a water-positive future to sustain people and nature now. It's our home, and our time is now.
And through our initial progress, we're already seeing how these new water targets are leading to action that actually supports positive impact on the ground. We have now 18 projects that are being supported across our priority basins and these water-stressed areas in scope for our targets in the United States. And some of those positive benefits specifically we could see in a couple of examples here. Our Brayton Restoration Project is being implemented by river partners in Northern California. They've already restored 25 acres of land back to native riparian habitat along the Sacramento River. And this not only provides a volumetric benefit to the river, but we've also seen it provide biodiversity benefits and also flood control benefits. Another example of how these targets have led to positive impact is our East Sand Slough Side Channel Reconnection Project being implemented by Chico State Enterprises. This project has brought back water into a channel to provide essential habitat to support endangered juvenile Chinook salmon and other species in this region. We also see our brands getting involved. The Cascade dishwashing brand in North America has been supporting water restoration projects in an effort to help us progress against our corporate goal and to support their campaigns that they've been running to help educate their consumer and others on how using the dishwasher can be more efficient than using the sink to wash dishes. And so we're really seeing these quantitative targets do what we wanted them to do, which was to motivate and to enable this on-the-ground action and positive impact to happen
and to allow us to be able to track that through a metric and communicate it in a simple way. And so what we expect over the next several years from now until 2030 is for more partnerships and projects to develop, and for more of this positive impact to be tracked, and not only the volumetric benefit, but also looking at what are those other co-benefits happening for people and nature in the areas that we're focused. Throughout the journey, we've definitely encountered challenges, and we've learned a lot of lessons. Many of these lessons will be addressed in our publication. We'll call those out and discuss them, again, to be released in October 2022. But just to cover a few of them here today, the first was that realizing we couldn't let the lack of exact, perfect data stand in the way of moving in the right direction to address these increasingly big challenges, and to do that fast. We worked to use the best available data to set these targets and to get started with on-the-ground actions that could really start to address the unique water challenges happening in these water-stressed areas. Finally, well, not necessarily finally, but another lesson that we learned was that quantitative water targets should be part of a broader water stewardship strategy, and that these quantitative targets can really help to simplify this concept of water stewardship, drive action, and allow simple tracking using one metric in order to, again, motivate that action on the ground and to see those benefits happening in over the period of your goal or your target. I'll leave you with this. I hope that as more organizations develop and begin to implement water targets across their value chains, including additional downstream focused targets that address impacts coming from the use of products or services, that we can help to build a water positive future together that can sustain people and nature now and for generations to come. Thank you so much. Bye.
All right, so Shannon cannot be here in person today, so she cannot answer the questions live, but please make sure you put your questions on the Paddleball platform, and I will make sure that Shannon answers the questions when she gets back from Stockholm. As the next session, we would like to invite Truca to present the water target setting journey of Cargill and what the learnings are for Cargill as well. So Truca.
Thank you, Nanda. So will you be sharing the slides, or do you like me to share my screen?
I will share the slides. My computer's getting slow. Can you see the slides now?
Yes.
All right.
So thank you, Nanda. So as I said before, but for those of you who maybe have joined later, I'm Truca Smoor. I'm the global water lead at Cargill, and I'm responsible for our water strategy and for Cargill globally. If you can go to the next slide. So for those of you that don't know Cargill, Cargill is a company with more than 155 years of experience, and we work across the globe. But what we really do is connecting, on one hand, farmers and growers and ranchers with their markets for their agricultural ingredients, but also connect these to our downstream customers, which are the food and beverage companies that many of you know, and really connecting globally for these key ingredients. But also we aim to be this most trusted partner. Our purpose is to nourish the world in a safe, responsible, and sustainable way, and it's really core towards how we are addressing this. If you go to the next slide. So at Cargill, we have identified key priorities like many of the companies do. You see climate, land, water, and people. And we have set targets for each of those. And the reason I'm calling this out is because I feel like water is a very integral part of everything we do. So it's not addressed in a silo, but it's part of this holistic view. And we see agriculture as how we will address these issues across the whole spectrum. You can move to the next. So let's look at the approach that we have taken for water. So Cargill's approach been data-driven, embedded in the best available science at that time. It's catalyzing action where it's needed most. So that prioritization is really a key and essential part. So this is where our journey started. It's like the recognition of water is critical, but it's also the recognition of we cannot do it all and we cannot do it alone. So how can we prioritize action and where should we focus? So that gets to that third part of the local water challenges in priority watersheds. So translating a global strategy into local priorities is what is really essential towards this journey. And then when we say local water challenges, that also means like understanding what actually is the issue in that local context. So we made a conscious decision to not only look at water quantity, but also look at water quality and accessibility. So it's really kind of understanding these challenges, how we are contributing, and how do we have an ability to drive change. All of this has been documented in the practice note that was published by the World Resource Institute and that we developed together and can be downloaded on the website, where you can see the underlying methods, the data sets that we have used, but the entire approach that we have taken. You can go to the next. So what this has led to is a global ambition, and the global ambition to achieve sustainable water use by 2030 within our facilities, in our communities, and across our supply chain. And I will walk through these three different elements. So if you look at our operations, basically what is essential actually throughout all of these is that we create this local ownership. And you've heard me talking about this before, is this saying we have to create the ownership at a local level so that they can tailor these programs to the needs, to their local challenges, because every water situation is unique. So this is why we have developed our water stewardship program that is guided by the Alliance for Water Stewardship standards, but that we look at what we can do inside our operations, but also in that watershed context, and how we can eliminate any unsustainable water impact in these local watersheds. If you look at the communities, this is where we're looking at improving access to safe drinking water, sanitation, and hygiene in these priority watersheds that we identified from overlaying our supply chain and our operations footprint. We recognize like water is a fundamental human right and is essential for communities to thrive. So again, we're looking at basically two parallel paths. One is leveraging our engagement with the communities and our community resilience assessments, and leveraging how we can empower these communities, empower women to create these thriving communities in that local context where we originate or where we operate. On the other hand, we're looking at scalable solutions that move the needle at large. And those are the parallel tracks we're working on. And we're relying a lot on our critical partnerships, like with the Global Water Challenge, and doing projects like in West Africa and in Indonesia to advance towards those goals. So when we did the analysis of our materiality, like our dependency, our impact, our ability to drive change, you see that more than 90% of our impact is in our supply chain. So this is where we've set our biggest targets. And so we commit to enable the restoration of 600 billion liters of water and the reduction of 5 million kilograms of excess nutrients in these priority watersheds. But those aren't random numbers. Those are the result of that analysis that we did, where we taken the first step is saying, well, where do we have a material impact, a material dependency, a in ability to drive change. So to do that, we mapped our supply chain and we leveraged the available data that we had. In some cases, that's primary data because we originate directly from farmers. In other cases, that is leveraging public data sources to understand where an origination footprint is, where a certain crop is grown. And once we understand that origination, you move to a next level saying, so what's our footprint? Again, the combination of what do we know, how can we leverage what we know, but also how can we leverage public data sets of irrigation footprint, of excess nutrients, and the model data that are available. And then from there on, the next step is like, well, what is the desired change? And in that local watershed context, and with the combination of these three aspects, you get targets that are proportional to your footprint, but also proportional to the severity of the local issues in these priority watersheds. And as a result, these targets become a prioritization and a really strategic objective towards how can we drive meaningful change where it's needed most. So it also means like we brought down the number of watersheds where we have to focus on from over 6,000 in our total supply chain to about 100. If you go to the next slide. So here you see our key priority watersheds, and we've divided them in the blue ones that are addressing where we have to address availability, the gray ones focus on water quality, and the green ones where we focus on access to safe drinking water, sanitation, and hygiene. So if you go to the next, this is where this gets me to, once we have set these targets, how can we now achieve these, and how can we get there? And the statement you see here is actually, I think, a pretty bold statement. And I think a widely cited and widely known number is that 70% of the global average water withdrawals is associated with agriculture. But this goes one step farther, because in these sources that you see cited here, you see that they take another step of how can we address the gap between water demand and water supply, and what are the opportunities that exist, and which of these are the most cost effective. And again, you see that through agriculture, there's a massive opportunity out there, and it's identified as the most cost effective opportunity. So for Cargill, that means how can we address that, and how can we get there? So if you go to the next slide. So we see on one hand, the farmers' desire to improve water management and increase profitability. And on the other side, you see the demand to reduce risks, to ensure availability and meet commitments, whether that's from private sector companies, from governments, from local stakeholders. And what we see for Cargill's role is to really enable these farmer-centric solutions to drive watershed outcomes. A very motivating moment for me was a conversation we had with a farmer where we talked about like how we are engaging with him. And the first thing he called out was how we're supporting regenerative agriculture practices, that they help actually in their soil moisture. But through soil moisture, the importance of reducing the dependency on irrigation. And these farmers are looking for ways to keep their land, to make that more resilient, and to be able to see a sustainable future while dealing with these uncertainties that come with the changing weather patterns. And I think that's one part of the story, where the other part of the story is really around like the stories we've heard earlier today about how can we actually address these risks? How can we mitigate these risks? How can we ensure the availability? What are the pathways? And so this is what we're working towards. If you go to the next slide. So in the past years, we've had critical learnings as well around like how can we actually tap into these scaling these watershed outcomes in agriculture. And when we talk about these watershed outcomes, we see one that like volumetric water benefits, but also nutrient reductions. And we've came to like this list of 4 critical aspects that are all very important. And actually all of them need to be addressed. It starts with the right context. Like when we generate water benefits, we have to ensure that we're actually addressing the issue that's at hand. And I think it's with all these projects and programs that we develop, it's about what is the watershed issue and what are we trying to achieve. And we've heard that in the presentation from Procter & Gamble as well. It's like there's different solutions everywhere, and everywhere you have to start with thinking, what can we do here? Is it about recharging an aquifer? Is it about reducing the amount of runoff and erosion? Or is it about improving the water quality, but also connecting that to what is the challenge in that local context? Secondly, oh yeah, can you go back to the previous? Like, secondly is the right behavior. So this is really critical to understand that improving water efficiency, for example, if you improve water efficiency, but then the next farmer or the next field or the next operations are actually using that water, in the end, you're not improving at a watershed level. So understanding that we need absolute reductions is another element where that helps us think through how we actually address these. The third one is the right duration. So water issues, we have acute water issues, but there are many of these are chronic issues. Like doing a project in 1 year will help you, but if you're not addressing the root cause, or if you're not able to sustain these over time, it's very difficult to actually address the issue at large. So ensuring the right duration of these projects is important. And last but not least is the right practices. So there are many synergies between water and biodiversity, or water and climate adaptation, or water and greenhouse gas reductions. However, we have to be conscious about how we're building these programs, because sometimes you can also see that one type of practice is actually making it worse for another. An example is when we're looking at intensifying the land and the amount of crops that are grown. If the overall demand for water goes up, we have to realize that while we're sequestering carbon, we could actually make the water stress situation worse. So taking an holistic approach and be conscious about the impacts of the full program. Like on one hand, leveraging the positive synergies that we see, but be conscious about any of these balances we have to take is a very critical part of how we are looking at scaling our opportunities, and also the challenges of like tapping into that opportunity of how can we create these benefits in agriculture. If you go to the next slide. So what you see here is one of our major programs. This is Cargill Regen Connect. So this is a program where we incentivize farmers to plant cover crops and to go to a no-till or reduced tillage, so-called conservation tillage practices. And this is a program that has both water and climate outcomes. We launched this in June 2021, and actually we expanded it to 15 states in the US. So farmers, they can sign up and enroll their acres in this program. And with that, they will keep the soil covered and reduce these tillage practices. And the effect of that is that you increase the soil moisture, you increase the aquifer recharge, and with that, you have a decreased demand for irrigation, and you sequester carbon. And this is a program that we see as a scalable solution that allows to then address all these critical issues that are needed to build these water benefits at scale. If you go to the next slide. So in short, when we're looking at the pathways and the learnings, we see that every watershed requires its local solutions, but many of them for us start with empowering farmers and restoring nature. Today I talked about an example of how we do that in field with farmers, but we see that across all the levels, from in field to edge of field and the basin solutions, where we're looking together with partners and often with NGOs and other customers on how we can address basin solutions as well. I will stop here because there's many more things and many other examples I give, but I want to ensure that we give the audience also some time to ask questions.
Thank you, Truca. And we would like to open the floor for questions from participants. So if you have any questions, please raise your hand, or I'm going to also check Vathabal if there are questions here. Do we have any questions from participants? No? Let's see. No, I think we don't have any questions for participant. I'm gonna call out the names, right? Like if you don't have questions. All right, I wouldn't do that. Okay, then would that be okay, Truka, if we move to the next sessions? Yeah. All right. So thanks, Truka, for the very good presentation. And, we learned a lot about how the enterprise water target was set by P&G and also by Cargill. We learned about the high level details of corporate water targets. The next step is going to be really practicing how to set the target. So you have to take off your learning hat and now you have to put on your doing hat, right? So it's going to be very intense exercise for you. So I would suggest we take a 5 minutes break because I think a lot of people are tired. So we take a 5 minutes break and we meet back in 5 minutes and we will start to the actual target setting work. So we will meet in 5 minutes. See you soon.
Hey, Nanda. So sorry, I was taking actually a brief break at that time, so I could not answer you.
Oh, no, it's okay. All right, we have past 5 minutes, so I hope you had you were able to drink some water, or you want to go to the toilet and something like that. So next, we will be starting with the practical sessions. But before we start with the practical session, I think it's going to be a good idea for us to listen to a very short song just to recharge our mind before we move on with the very high intense session. So I will share something to you. This is a song that I sometimes listen to if I became very overloaded during work. And I hope you also like this as well. And let me know if you cannot hear it very well.
Granddaughter, the water can hear you. The water has memory. Nibi, Wabo, Endayan, Water is the life's blood of our mother, the earth. Water is the lifeblood of our own body. To continue to pass on the knowledge that needs to be given unto the other generations. You are the keeper of the water.
To make the change in this life condition that we're in, that great-grandchildren will stand up to this truth of what life is about, and to live it in such an honorable way, the way ancestors came to this earth. Each day when the sun rises, no matter how bad the day before might have been, there's a new chance for your hopes and dreams. And I say, Chimigwech, thank you for singing the water song.
right, I hope you enjoyed the song, and I really hope you were able to hear the sound actually. So let's move on with the session. So, where's the, yeah. All right, so I want to do a little bit of introduction on the organization that I work for. It's called Water Resources Institute. The institute was established about 50 years ago, and it really focuses on creating knowledge products that are going to be helpful for businesses, government, community, etc. And within the Water Resources Institute, there is a program called Water Program. And in the Water Program, we have a group of companies that come together that are shown here, and they talk about what the challenges that they face when it comes to the water in their businesses. And based on the challenges that they face, we work together to find the solutions for them, but not just find the solution for one particular business, but we also find the solution, and then we publish the solutions to a wide audience so that the work that we have done for the businesses can be used by other parties that can benefit from these knowledge products as well. So that's what we do in the Water Resources Institute Water Program. So in this session, we want to inspire you on how your business or the businesses you work with can set enterprise water targets across the value chain. So we will actually show you how to use the Aqueduct tool, which is the tool that is in our developed by the Water Program, and then also introduce you to the future updates to the Aqueduct tool. I want to show you a little bit more on the other tools that you can use to set enterprise water targets. I'm not going to go very deep details into it because there are so many tools out there, and really the right tools that you choose is going to be based on your business needs and what your goals for your water program as well. So to do the exercise, I have already shared you the link to download the Excel sheet. So please make sure that you download the Excel sheet. Also have a piece of paper and pens to do the exercises as well. So yeah, if you have any problems with downloading the Excel sheet, you need to let me know now so that I can help you with it. See if I have any comments. No, I don't have any message, so I'm going to assume that you have all the documents that you need. So guys, in 1 month, we are going to go into a weather called fall weather. So I'm very excited about it because it's a weather that's going to be favorite for me. What is very noticeable about fall weather, if you are not familiar with it, is some of the leaves on the tree are going to turn yellow and red, and it's going to look very beautiful. But, you know, I started thinking, why do these leaves turn red and yellow? And the answer is the leaves turn red and yellow because they started to realize that after the fall, the winter is going to come, there will be less sunlight, and they're not going to make food from the sunlight anymore. So to really save the energy when there's not going to be sunlight, so you're not going to be able to make food, to save the energy, the leaves started dying so that the plants can save their energies when the spring comes. But the pattern of how the leaves fall is actually different in each tree. So the leaves that receive the most sunlight actually stayed the longest on the tree, but the leaves that receive the least sunlight, they started dying the fastest. This is actually an example of prioritization, right? Like the tree doesn't want to use all the energies in all the different leaves when the winter comes. So they started prioritizing the leaves that are going to get the most sunlight, and they started killing the leaves that are going to get the least sunlight. So this is a story of prioritization. And I find it very similar to enterprise water target setting. And that's why I shared this story, because in enterprise target setting, it is also about prioritization. What do we prioritize in enterprise water targets then? We prioritize the sections of the value chain where you are going to work in. Are you gonna focus on the upstream of your value chain where you work with the farmers and the manufacturers, or are you gonna go work in the downstream of your value chain where you have consumers or other parties that are in the downstream part. You also prioritize the location. Are you going to work only for your for the basin where your factories are located, or are you going to work in the basins that are far away from your business, but still very relevant to you? So you also prioritize the location. Once you prioritize a section of the value chain that you work with, and then the locations that you're going to work in, then you start setting the enterprise water targets for the areas that are going to be prioritized for you. Why do we do the prioritization? We do the prioritization because we want to start with the doing thing, right? We don't have so much time anymore. We want to start with the doing things. Once we started doing it, you learn how your processes can be improved. Based on this learning, you improve your processes, and then you can scale up to really allocate your resources more. So, you know, you start with the doing, improve, and scale up. That's all the prioritization is about. As a first step of the prioritization, like I said, you are going to prioritize sections of the value chain. Please pay attention to this slide, because this slide is going to be used for the exercise. When you prioritize the sections of the value chain, you think about three things. One is how your business depends on the water. So, you know, are you using a lot of water from the water resources, or how do you depend on the water? And then the next thing is your impact. What is your business impact on the water, right? And then the next thing that you can also consider is how you can possibly influence the sections of the value chain you work with. So sometimes you work with farmers, and these farmers are in a very remote area, and you feel like in this next 2 to 3 years, you won't be able to work with those farmers. So you decided to not focus on those farmers. So you can think about how you can influence with the available resources that you have, and then you scale it up later. So that's how you prioritize the sections of the value chain. When you talk about water, in terms of how you depend on the water or how you impact on the water, we're not just talking about the volume of water that you experience. We're talking about different aspects of water, things like water access, water quality, and then water quantity, but you can also think about ecosystem services, extreme weather events, and water governance as well. So I'm not gonna go very in detail into it, because you have receive a very good overview of how Cargill set the water targets. Cargill has committed to restoring over 600 billion liters of water in the priority watersheds, and also thought about you know, water quality aspect as well by reducing 5 million kilograms of water pollutants. And then there's also access to water aspects in the Cargill case study as well. So for the Cargill case study, you know, how they prioritize the sections of the value chain by looking at the different parts of the value chain, and they did a materiality assessment. How is the dependency of the water? Is it high or medium or low? Similar thing, what is your impact on the water? Is your water footprint high, or is your water footprint medium or low? The Cargill thought about that. Also, the ability to drive chain was also another aspect that they thought about. And based on all these combinations, they prioritize agriculture crop and direct operations for the enterprise target setting effort. Very similar thing. P&G also recently announced their enterprise water target setting by focusing on 18 water stress manufacturing sites, and also 2 priority sites that have the largest proportions of consumer water use among the priority basins as well. So how did P&G prioritize the sections of the value chain? So they did a life cycle assessment. So how much water would they need during the production of the raw materials? How much water do they need during the direct operation? And then how much water do they need when the consumers are using water? And P&G found out that the consumers are the biggest water user in their value chain. And for that reason, P&G decided to focus on the consumer water use as opposed to farmers' water use when it was the case of Cargill's. P&G also decided that they're going to focus on the direct operations because, you know, that's an area that you can really drive the change, and P&G decided to focus on the direct operation. For this round of target setting, P&G decided not to focus on the raw material productions because raw material use, water use is not as big as consumer water use, but also the areas where the raw materials are coming from, it's really hard to trace. So P&G decided to work on the direct operation and consumer water use in the current enterprise target setting. The publication on how P&G developed the enterprise target setting will be released very soon, sometimes in October. If you want to join the launch of the publication, please use the link here to register for the event, and you will understand more about the technical details of how P&G estimated how the consumer are using their water. Some of the industries that are going to be relevant for that publication long, agriculture inputs, so things like fertilizer, pesticide, chemicals, that has very important downstream water quality impact. Similar thing, pharmaceutical, consumer goods, textile clothing, packaging material, and electronic. All these have water quantity and water quality impacts in the downstream usages. All right, so we will first start with the first part of the exercise. I will show you the prioritization aspect. So, you know, when you look at the value chain, you have to first, when you develop the enterprise water targets, you look at your value chain and you have to identify which parts of the value chain you want to focus on. Are you going to focus on farmers, consumer, upstream, downstream, etc.? So in the exercise, what I would like you to do is please look at this slide. There are 5 stages of value chain, right? Like growing from this textile retail distribution company, and they have 5 stages of value chain, starting from growing the cotton to consumer usages. I have given you some information regarding water dependency of the business, water impact of the business, and also ability to drive change throughout the value chain. I've given you quantitative information as well as qualitative information. So try to look at this and then think about if you were to develop enterprise water targets for this business, which are the sections of, which are the stages of the value chain that you are going to prioritize. So think about it for a few minutes and then write down. There's no right or wrong answer. It really depends on how you feel, where you want to drive the changes. So it's really up to you to make the decision. So think about it and then write down the sections of the value chain that you want to focus on. And let me know if you have any questions. I will give you 2 minutes for this.
So Nanda, I had a question. So yes. in the slide it says, you know, ability to influence the actors. You know, so who are the actors here?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I should have explained. So actors is like the actors in the stage of the value chain. So for example, if you're in the stage of growing cotton, the actors are most likely going to be the farmers that grow cotton, right? Or if you look at the dyeing or finishing stage of the value chain, that's going to be the owners of the dyeing factory, or that kind of stuff. I didn't give you the information of how you can influence these actors because it's really depend on how you feel like it, right? Like if you're a business, you might think you can influence the cotton farmers way more than you can influence the consumer. That's up to you to decide. So right now, think about your justification and make a decision based on your justification. So it's really up to your decision.
Got it. Thank you.
And really let me know if you have any questions, just unmute yourself and let me know. All right, so I'm gonna stop here a little bit and want to hear some of your thoughts. Which part of the stage of value chain that you have prioritized. So just unmute yourself and give me some reflection on why you chose the section of the value chain and which section of the value chain you have chosen. I would like one volunteer for this. Can I choose you, Mansi? On Arash, you can. Hi, Mansi. Hello.
Hi. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
Yes. Actually, my internet is not really great. So is it okay if my camera is off?
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah.
Yeah, it just went on and off. But yeah, I think, okay, so I will just quickly introduce myself. I'm a water stewardship intern at the Kraft Heinz. I started just 3 weeks back. And great to know about this session. Actually, it's very interesting. And I also thought about the panels. They were really amazing. And I'm still in a learning phase, I would say. I don't have so much inside knowledge, I would say, with the data. But as per the prioritization of the sections, personally speaking, from an academic view, if I may say, I think garment manufacturing for me would be one of the highest water consuming part. It could be that it's subjective to company or businesses, but obviously a growing cotton itself is also water intensive. But for me, garment manufacturing also has to do a lot with how it's done, as in the machinery involved, and the washing involved, the sanitation involved. So I would say maybe if you see it as a whole, the manufacturing, probably I could say it could be towards the medium higher side of the water activity.
Yeah, that's interesting. Thanks for sharing, Mansi. And yeah, so please keep the answers, and then you are going to use that part of the session for target setting. So yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. Thanks so much for sharing. Naresh, would you like to say? You unmuted yourself.
Yeah, so Nanda, you wanted like maybe one or maybe two priorities? Is that
as
okay?
Much as you want. Yeah,
okay.
It depends on what you want to prioritize. Yeah.
So I was thinking that, like, also based on the slides that you've shown, the two areas that seem to be very important are growing cotton and the consumer use, because, the volume seems to be so high. So the overall impact percentage would be high. And I was also thinking that from a consumer perspective, like, although the dyeing and finishing part is volume is less, but, there is a reputational risk, for the company, because, they are sending the polluted water, back, back to the river.
Yeah.
So there could be some reputation, very significant, risk because of that. So they also need to take care of that, somehow. So maybe, they can process the water, before sending it back to the river.
I agree. Yes. Thanks for sharing. Yeah, those are very important parts of the value chain, right? Like you don't just think about water quantity, but if you really set the water target, you have to think about all the shared water challenges, quality aspect, governance aspect, ecosystem services aspects, so all these different aspects you have to take care of it. So really, thanks for sharing, Naresh. So I'm gonna continue with the next step. So please note it down which sessions of the value chain that you have prioritized, because the next step is going to be about really trying to understand the impact and the risk of that part of the value chain, and then trying to prioritize the location. So let me share. All right, so the next step is, first, we talk about different steps of prioritization, right? The first, you prioritize the sessions of the value chain. The second step is then to prioritize location. when you prioritize location, there is no fixed formula to it. It really depends on what your business wants to do and what your available resources are. And based on your understanding of your business characteristics, then you think about a way for you to prioritize the location. I will give you some example of how Cargill and P&G prioritize. So for Cargill, they were thinking about water quantity, water quality, and water aspects throughout the supply chain. In addition to operations as well. So in those parts of the value chain, they thought about the severity of the water challenges that they face. So for example, if you are thinking about water availability, what is the severity of water availability challenges in that value chain? Also, they thought about materiality thresholds, right? So if you're located in a location and you have a lot of water impact, how is your impact compared to other people in that same basin? If your impact has the largest share compared to other actors in the basin, then you may want to really prioritize in that basin because your activity is the highest in the basin, right? So that's also another criteria for Cargill's location prioritization. Same with P&G. So P&G has a little bit different way of prioritization, I would say. So they started with all the different high areas where they face high or extremely high water stress manufacturing facility. And then they decided that they want to focus on the area where the P&G market is the most active, right? So if, for example, if in the US, P&G has a really big share of market and P&G decided to include US as one of the priority countries. In these priority markets, out of all the basin in those countries, P&G look for one basin where one P&G manufacturing facility is located. And then in that basin where one P&G manufacturing facility is located, they calculated the consumer water consumption in those basins and then came up with the prioritization strategy. So when we talk about the impacts and your dependency and impacts throughout your value chain, then you have to understand what is your impact in the basin, right? So there are different ways of calculating, and that really depends on what type of data that you are going to use, and it really differs. So there's no one fixed way of how you calculate agriculture water consumption and pollution in one basin. There are so many different ways that you can do it. For example, in the example of Cargill, they decided to find out where the basin where they source their materials from, and in that basin they use information from water footprint network to calculate blue water footprint, and then also calculate how much nutrient they discharge into the waterway as well. The same for livestock companies. You can look at different aspects of livestock production, right? You can look at feed production, or you can look at livestock production and also the processing factories as well. From those, you can calculate different aspects of producing livestock. What are the activities that consume a lot of water, and then how much pollutants you discharge from those activities as well. Based on those, you aggregate all your impacts in one particular basin where the activities happen, and then you find out what your livestock water consumption and pollution as well. This way of how you can calculate consumer water consumption in your value chain is going to be released when P&G publication is released in October. And I just want to give you a bit of teaser. So in every country, there is X amount of fresh water withdrawn for domestic usage. Out of the freshwater withdrawn for domestic uses, we calculated what is the water use, so associated with the use of P&G products. So water use and water consumptions are different, right? Water use is when you turn on the shower, the whole volume of water that is come on your body is the water use. Water consumption, on the other hand, is after you take a shower, there's some water left on your body and you wipe it with towels and stuff, or some of the water evaporate from from your body, that kind of stuff, that water is not returned back to the local watershed for beneficial uses in the downstream. So that is water consumption. So water use and water consumption are different. So for P&G, first they calculate how much is the water use, and out of the water use, they also calculated how much is the water consumption. And this water consumption is shown in the blue line here. So this is a blue line where we calculated how much water is consumed when people are using P&G product. And for this, we use a tool called material flow analysis. And we also aggregated all these information per basin, and then we did a risk assessment. This tool can be also used by other businesses with consumer water impact. So remember, I talk about agriculture input companies like fertilizer companies or pharmaceutical company, electronic companies, those kind of things. They can also do the same for your businesses as well. All right. So for the sake of time, I'm going to skip a little bit. And let's do the exercise again. This is going to be a very big chunk of the exercise. So let's do it together. First, does anyone have let's see. Does anyone have the Excel sheet that I have shared to you? All right. I don't say any no, so I will start with the exercise, and let me stop sharing. Okay, so please open your Excel sheet. And in the Excel sheet, you have something like this, right? So now click on the value chain stage. There's a down arrow here, and let me know if you cannot see my screen. Click on the arrow down here and select the section of the value chain you have previously prioritized. For example, Mansi, you prioritize garment manufacturing, so you can and click on select all, and you can click only on garment manufacturing. Naraj, you decided to do a prioritization of consumers. You also want to prioritize dyeing and finishing, and also cotton farming. So that's where you select the section of the value chain prioritize. For me, I have decided to prioritize for the consumer and cotton farming. So that's where I'm going to prioritize. And then I click on OK. So that gives you only the part of the value chain that you are going to prioritize. Okay, now here on this column, it gives you the water consumption. So how much water is consumed, right? When you do these activities. And then it gives you the latitudes and longitudes. So these are going to be important because you know exactly where that activity is happening. All right, so select all the latitude and longitude coordinates. Select all, so until at the end, right? And then you copy them. Are you guys following? Please let me know if you're not following anymore, right? And then you Google Aqueduct Atlas. Aqueduct Atlas. And it's gonna give you Aqueduct Water Risk Filter, right? Click on the link. It will show you this map, all right? In this map, what you want to do is you want to upload the latitudes and longitudes of your location. So you go to here at the bottom, there's import file. You click on the import file.
Hey, Nanda, could you share the link for that Aqueduct?
Oh, yeah, that's a good idea actually. So
yeah, and Nanda, your screen is currently still showing the Excel.
Oh, okay.
Yes, yes.
All right.
Yeah, I think we did not follow the last part about the going to Aqueduct.
Okay, so I sent you the link. Click on the link. Is it okay?
Yeah. So did you send it in the chat in this session?
Yeah, I sent it in the chat. Oh no, I sent it to one person only. Sorry.
Okay.
Yeah. So click on it. Right. Now I'm gonna share my screen again. Hopefully this time works. Can you guys see the interactive map now on my screen?
Yeah, yes, we can see.
Okay, so at the bottom, go to the import file. Yeah, click on it. It gives you an option of uploading addresses or uploading coordinates. Click on the coordinates. And then click on the spreadsheet option. Yeah. It's gonna download the spreadsheet. Click on this.
So we should give the same spreadsheet that we are using, right?
No, you have to download the spreadsheet that is here on my screen. You click on it. Yeah. And then it's gonna download the spreadsheet. So you open the downloaded spreadsheet. It's gonna give you a new spreadsheet. Is it working now, Naresh?
So this is the same one that had, the coordinates, right?
No. It's gonna give you a new spreadsheet.
I think it has example locations and example coordinates, right?
Yeah, example coordinates, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, okay. I got it. So,
Okay, so you delete all the information here, all these here. We are going to upload our own coordinates. So remember the things that you copy, right? You paste it here. Oh, sorry. All the coordinate, paste it in latitude and longitude, right?
And we don't need to worry about location name, right?
The location name is the let me stop sharing and share a new screen.
Okay, so we should copy the location name and the coordinates.
Location names are whether it is consumer or the cotton grower, right? So all these,
okay,
you copy it and put it in the location name. All right, on the location name, you copy paste it. So right now you have information, right? Cotton farming, latitude, longitude, consumer, latitude, longitude. You have all these information. Also try to drag down all the IDs, right? So all the IDs are also filled until the end. So for me, I have 49 locations. Now you save this Excel file, because this Excel file is going to upload the locations on the aqueduct map. Are we still following? Okay, so now we are going to upload the Excel file. So the file is already saved. The next thing is go back to aqueduct tool. So the map that we open, right, remember? So click on the select file. And then upload the file that you just created. So where the locations are and the latitudes and longitudes. So upload that Excel file. Now, all the information are here. So you want to see where the dots are here. It's all the locations in India. You can see the map, right? Can we all see the map? Let me know if you cannot. So this map we have uploaded all the location to the file, to the aqueduct tool. Now we want to run the analysis. The analysis is already run, right? So you want to download them. So download as CSV. So you download all the analysis. You open the analysis, right? It's gonna give you a bunch of information. I will show to you on the screen. So this is what the analysis looks like, and it's really hard to read, right? Because it's a lot of technical information. What I want you to do is only focus on two indicators that are, because we are going to only focus on water quantity aspects right now. BWS baseline water stress. Baseline water stress is the indicator that is highly used by all the different businesses to really understand their water quantity risk. It is about how much water is available in the area, and out of the available water, how much water is used and then return to the water basin, right? So you don't lose that water, you use it and then you return back to the basin. So that's what the indicator is about. Baseline water depletion is a little bit different. It's about how much water is consumed. So you use it and some of the water is not returned back to the basin. So we are talking about the water that is not returned back to the basin. And out of the water that is not returned back to the basin, how much is also available in the basin? So we are looking at how much water is available in the basin, and out of the available water, how much water we don't return back to the basin. So that's baseline water depletion is about. So those are the two indicators that we are going to focus on today. Okay, so let's go back to the Excel, the PowerPoint. We have the Excel downloaded. So I hope everything is okay with your Excel. Mansi, are you okay? Are you still following? And Naresh, are you still following?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Awesome. Okay. So now you have a little bit of feeling of what's a water risk that you are experiencing, right? Are you experiencing extremely high or high baseline water stress or baseline water depletion? In your file, you can see that. Or are you experiencing not so many, but there are a significant number of them? You can also see it. And then you think about the goal that you want to achieve. How much resources do you currently have? And based on that, you create your own prioritization strategy. So are you gonna think about the locations that you're working on, right? Like, so are you, for example, there will be very remote parts in India that you don't wanna, you can't work on right now. You want to work on areas around the city. That's an example. Or are you going to prioritize the location that's close to your facility? Or are you going to prioritize location where there's a lot of project activities around and you can easily find projects in that area? So all those different aspects you can think about. And then I want you to take 2 minutes and thought about how you're going to prioritize based on the data that you have. Are you gonna prioritize based on the risk that you are exposed to? Are you gonna prioritize based on your business needs? Are you gonna prioritize what you can do? So all these things, you can create a list of prioritization of location. Are we still good? And I can show you prioritization strategies for Cargill, right? So they think about water quality, availability, water quality, water access. We are only gonna focus on water quantity today for our exercise. P&G, they also thought about where your facilities are located, and you choose the basins where your facilities are located, because that's where you can influence most of your effort on. So create your own way of prioritization. There's no right or wrong answer. It really depends on your business needs and the resources that you have. Okay, we will use 1 more minute because we're very close to ending the session in 30 minutes. So are we all good? Can I have some, say yes if you're all good, say no if you still need more time. Otherwise, I'm gonna move on.
Hey, Nanda, it's all good. So I had a question. So if you were doing, I had a question. So we were just doing it based on the volume, the quantity. But if you're doing it on the multiple criteria, how do you combine all those multiple criteria to come out with the highest priority locations? Right.
So I would suggest you first write down all the prioritization criteria, right? So think about, are you gonna focus on the volumes, or are you also gonna focus on where your facilities are located, that kind of thing. So just write it down. Does it make sense to you? But also remember, if you're working with the business, you have to sell your how you prioritize a location to your CEO or the executive board or anything, something like that. So you have to make a very strong justification, right? Like you have to go to them and really, really push, like, this is how you're going to prioritize because this makes sense to our business. So that's how you do it. And you have to have a very good justification behind it.
Got it, yeah. Yeah, I think as we saw in the Cargill example, so they had their own prioritization. So it will depend on the business.
Right, yeah, yeah. Okay, so we're gonna move on. Now we're gonna move on with the target setting. There's so many different targets, ways of setting targets. The ones that I'm going to present to you are two types of targets, two major categories. One is process-oriented targets. The process that you are going to follow to say in the layman's term, to make the river basin a good river basin, right? That's a very layman term, but like if you want to be technical, to reduce the risk that you are exposed to and address the share water challenges. So the process that you're going to follow to reduce the risk and address the share water challenges. There's also outcome-oriented targets. Outcome-oriented targets don't focus on the process that you're going to follow, but the actual outcome that you are going to get. So things like quantitative outcomes, right? Like Cargill and P&G talk about the different quantitative outcomes in terms of water volumes or water pollutants that you're going to mitigate. You can also have qualitative outcomes as well. So with the qualitative outcomes, you can describe in qualitatively what is going to happen to the river basin after implementing your water stewardship strategy. So there's also a qualitative outcome that you can describe. So it really depends on what you want to do with your business, what is the best suited for your business. So I'm going to show you some example of process-oriented outcomes and outcome-oriented outcomes. So for process-oriented outcomes, some of the examples that are in the Enterprise Water Target Setting Guidebook, Nestle, for example, they said we're going to do a process of certifying all the alliance or other operation of facility with Alliance for Water Stewardship standards by 2025. So that's an outcome, right? So you have to make sure that it is a smart outcome also, right? So it's going to be specific, measurable, time-bound, and forgetting R. So those you have to follow, and you really have to describe that the process that you're going to follow is going to lead to the betterment of the river basin. So that's the process-oriented outcome. Outcome-oriented outcomes, like I said, can be quantitative or qualitative, right? So in our exercise today, we're going to come up with the outcome-oriented quantitative target. So this is the outcome-oriented, this is a water target that we're going to develop today. Some of the example, things like Cargill, right? Cargill is going to reduce 5 million kilograms of water pollutants by 2030. So that's a really quantitative outcome that they're going to achieve by 2030. So that's a outcome-oriented quantitative targets. There can also be outcome-oriented qualitative targets. So you talk about the outcome in qualitative way. So for example, Microsoft, they qualitatively say that by 2030, the companies make sure that it replenish more water than it uses. So that's an outcome, but it doesn't tell you quantitatively, but it tells you the outcome qualitatively. So that's another target that you can focus on. So now I will tell you different options of coming up with quantitative outcome-oriented target setting, right? So remember, this is an outcome that is going to be described quantitatively. Example like Cargill or P&G. When you come up with the quantitative outcome-oriented targets, there are different options. One is to use a gap approach. This is a contextual water target gap approach using data like Aqueduct tool. Basically, what you do is you look at the river basin, what is the current state of the river basin, and what is the desired state of the river basin, and how much work would you have to do to make the river basin change from the current state to the desired state. So the example equation that you can use here is current state minus desired state divided by current state. You can also decide to just replenish all your footprint in the water basin and not think about the current state and the desired state of the basin, the volume is going to be larger than the gap approach, but it's also another way of setting the water targets. Some of the other example things like science-based target, net positive water target, you can also think about those as well. I am not going to cover those because the science-based target is having their own sessions. I think later today you can attend the session. Also, you can read a lot of materials related to net positive water target. Okay, so today in the exercise we will use that gap approach and replenishment of the footprint approach. Okay, so we will go to that exercise. I'm gonna skip this slide for now. We will go to the exercise. Do we have any questions before we go to the exercise? I don't see any questions, so let's go to the exercise. Let's go back to the Excel sheet that you downloaded from Aqueduct tool. So remember, the Excel sheet with so much information that you cannot read, right? So just go to this Excel sheet. I want you to copy and paste four columns. One is the BWS raw. So BWS is baseline water stress. Copy all that number, BWS raw, under the column, copy all that number. Go back to the Excel sheet where we first started. So the target setting exercise Excel sheet. The first Excel sheet that we downloaded. Paste all the BWS raw number. Yeah. Are we following it? I'm gonna assume you are following it. Now, I also want you to copy BWS label as well from the downloaded Excel sheet. So BWS label is like, it says extremely high or that kind of stuff. Copy all that information and then paste it into the target setting exercise Excel sheet. So BWS label, copy all that information. Oh. So now your Excel sheet for target setting exercise is going to look like that. BWS label, it tells you that, you know, extremely high, and then BWS raw score, the number, right? Do the same for BWD, baseline water depletion. So do the same, copy BWD label, and then copy BWD raw score. Make sure you copy the raw information. So I'm going to share my screen back. BWD raw score and BWD raw score is here, and then BWD label is here as well. So you copy all that information and paste it in the Excel sheet. Are we following it? Okay. All right. So I will share you the screen on how my target setting exercise sheet is look like. So we have all the baseline water stress label, extremely high or high, the raw score, it gives you 1 point something or 0 point something, you know. The same with BWD label and BWS label. Now we will do the gap analysis. So think about the current state of your river basin and the desired state of the river basin. The typical number for the desired state that we use for BWS is 40%. The typical number for desired state that we use for baseline water depletion is 25%. So let's calculate the percent change required. So you start with the current raw score. So for example, here we have 1.18 minus 40%, which is the the desired state that we want to achieve divided by the current state. Okay, current state minus desired state divided by the current state. It gives you the percentage of change required for that river basin. Same with BWD, equal to current state, which is 0.45 minus desired state, which is 25%, divided by current state. So the difference between the desired states for BWS and BWD is BWS, we use desired state of 40%, and BWD, we use a desired state of 25%. And then you can just come up with the plus sign here, just click on everything, and it gives you the desired state that you want to achieve. Same with the other BWW as well. So this gives you the percentage of change required in that river basin to get to the desired state. Now, we want to calculate how much your company is supposed to do along with all the other people in the basin to reach to the desired state. So what you basically do is you multiply the water consumptive volume in the front. So it gives you 354,000, for example. You multiply with the desired state percentage change that you want to achieve in that river basin. That gives you the volume that you have to do in that river basin to fulfill the responsibility of the shared responsibility of your company. If all the other people in the river basin do the same, then the basin is going to get to a desired state. So you calculate it for it. The same with BWD. You multiply the desired state for BWD. You multiply that with the water consumptive volume. It gives you the volume that you want to achieve for your business to get to the desired state for the basin. So it gives you the different volumes. How do you choose between BWS and BWD? There is no fixed equation for that. You have to make the right choice based on your business need, and you can also consult with different parties, people from Aqueduct for sure. We know a lot about the baseline water stress indicator and baseline water depletion indicator, and we can advise you which indicator that you use that is going to help you. So if you have any questions when you're doing something for your business, just let us know by email or something like that, right? So this is actually how you come up with the target volume. Remember in Cargill, they calculate about 600 million liters to be replenished, to be benefit that they want to deliver in the river basin. How do you come up with the 600 million? You just sum up all these information until the end. So I'm gonna delete all these. You just sum it up, everything here. And that gives you the total volume that you need to deliver in that river basin. So that's how we come up with the different water targets. I am going to rush a little bit through now because we have 15 minutes. So before I rush through, I want to take any questions that you have when you're doing the exercise. So do we have any questions right now? Are you stuck with something? Please let me know.
Hey, Nanda, so just one question. Are we doing this exercise only for those, priority categories like we decided, cotton and consumer? So we are only doing it for those two categories. Is that right? Or?
Well, you can definitely do it for all the other segments of the value chain. But yeah, I mean, if you want to understand only the ones that you have prioritized, that's how you prioritize it. Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah. Yeah, because I mean, the calculation is the same, right? It's all about how you prioritize. Then now you calculate it, the sections of the value chain. Now you use the criteria on prioritization, the location, to select which are the roles that you're going to prioritize, right? Are you gonna prioritize based based on the location where your facility is located, or are you going to prioritize based on the volume of that the water user, etc. So you do that filter, and then it gives you the total volume of the targets. So this is a very quick and dirty way of doing the targets. I mean, it has a lot of technical details involved in the end, but I just want to show you what is typically done in our target setting approach. But this is, I mean, you definitely don't do it in half an hour, right? Like you have to do it. Usually, sometimes it takes 6 months or even a year to actually come up with the targets, communicate to the responsible people within your organization, and communicate it to the outside people in the organizations as well. But I just want to show you the quick and dirty way of doing the target setting. So yeah,
got it. I think this is helpful. So we could always start with maybe 1 or 2 categories, and then once we have a good understanding, then we can move on to other categories.
Yeah, exactly. Do you have any more questions? Otherwise, I'm going to rush through because we have 10 more minutes, so I want to finish my PowerPoints as well. I hope this session is helpful to you. The next thing that I am going to do is after you said that.
Excuse me.
Yeah, go ahead.
Do we have time for? I have.
Yeah, Tatiana. Yes. Yeah.
Yes. Sorry, it's Ariane Lardo. I logged in with the company email, and it gave me my colleague's name. Sorry. So Ariane Lardo from Qantas. Thank you very much for this practical exercise. It's very useful. I have 2 questions. So one is, I see that if I understand it correctly, the percentage of state for the percentage for the desired state is the same regardless of the status of the basin you're looking at, right?
Exactly, but it is different when you use different indicators, right? BWS are different desired state than BWD.
Okay, so if you're looking at low risk and high risk, you will still want the same percentage of change.
Yeah, yeah. So if you only look at baseline water stress, regardless of other basin, the typical number that we use is 40% for the desired state. And if you look at baseline water depletion, regardless of the river basin, the desired state is 25%.
Okay, thank you. And my second question is, I see that some percentage of change and also volume change, some are negative and some are positive. Can you please explain a bit more on that?
Yeah, so for example, that's a very quick question. I forgot to mention this to you actually. So if you get a negative answer, what that means is the river basin is not facing high or extremely high baseline water stress. So it might face medium or low water stress. In that case, you can opt out not to assign a value to that river basin. So you can just put 0 in that. But you may also decide to do something in that river basin. In that case, you can think out different ways, but that's also going to be, depending on your business. Does it make sense to you?
Yes, thank you very much.
Yeah, so the typical way that we do is if you get a negative answer, negative calculation, then we only put 0 in that river basin because that river basin has already met the desired state.
Okay, thank you, Nanda.
Yeah, no worries. So I'm gonna play one more presentation. So after you have developed the water targets, then you move on with actions. And Scott from Bonneville Environmental Foundation is going to tell you a little bit about how you really select the right projects to address the needs of your water stewardship program. And he is based in the US, so it's quite early in the morning for him. So that's why we are only gonna play the PowerPoint.
Hello, my name is Scott McCullough, and I'm the director of the Water Stewardship Project Portfolio with the Bonneville Environmental Foundation. My presentation today will focus on the role of BEF's Business for Water Stewardship program in helping companies implement effective water stewardship efforts to meet their enterprise water targets and provide maximum benefit to the communities and watersheds where they operate. The Business for Water Stewardship program, referred to as BWS, was founded in 2009 to respond to a growing opportunity to work with leading companies to help achieve water-related sustainability goals. Since that time, BWS has worked with a wide range of companies, over 90, to provide $24 million to almost 300 projects. These contributions have supported a wide array of project types, including urban, industrial, agricultural water conservation, source water protection, agricultural best management practices, nature-based ecosystem restoration, water access, sanitation, and hygiene projects, and many other innovative project types. Collectively, these actions have restored over 36 billion gallons of water to communities and watersheds. BWS undertakes a multi-step process that is unique to the needs of each individual corporate partnership. First, we map priority watersheds or basins. We assess needs within key watersheds, define the project geography, identify primary water issues, and outline the types of water projects that can have the greatest impact. Then we identify, vet, match, and solicit the best available water projects and implementation partners that align directly to the targeted geographies and impact goals. We rank future projects against available budget allocations to prioritize impact over time. And from this work, we then curate a diverse portfolio of high quality and high impact conservation and restoration projects. Next, we manage water stewardship contracts and funding, ensuring financial support gets to the best partners and projects on a timeline that works for project implementation. We connect with project implementation partners to ensure accurate reporting against goals, and we provide approved project metrics, quotes, and stories to share impact with employees, customers, and other important stakeholders. Finally, we strive to use our experience in this space to innovate and evolve. And I'll talk about this a bit more in a minute. But first, I want to talk about some of the unifying project elements that BWS is looking for on behalf of our corporate partners. First, projects need to address one or more real and recognized needs within a watershed. Each watershed is unique, so we need to make sure our approach is tailored to address the most important factors for any individual watershed. Second, projects need to have a clear outcome that can be tracked. We work with project partners to define clear outcomes and ensure appropriate monitoring is in place to document those outcomes. Next, project outcomes should go beyond simply drops of water, but secure other co-benefits for communities like recreation, water access, improvement of infrastructure, enhanced economic opportunities, and many others. Also, projects should leverage action from other funders, whether they are private or public supporters. And finally, a high-quality water stewardship project should be either scalable or innovative in some form, and preferably both of these things. Here are a couple of project examples that were funded in the past year. The first project is a partnership in the Upper Sacramento, in California, that restores an important side channel, which, due to alteration of the natural hydrograph, has been disconnected from the main channel. The primary objective of this project was to reconnect the channel to produce more habitat for a target species, in this case, Chinook salmon. An important co-benefit was the potential to expand recreation for the urban communities that live in and around the river. This next project is located in the Middle Bear River watershed in southern Idaho and is an effort to restore the natural hydrologic function of Battle Creek, an important tributary to the main stem Bear River. When complete, the project will provide enhanced water storage within the floodplain, improved water quality, and restored wetlands and riparian areas. The project also helps the northwest band of the Shoshone Nation reclaim a site of monumental cultural and historical significance to their people by restoring the site to the condition that their ancestors would have experienced prior to colonization. I'd like to spend the last few slides looking forward from the corporate water stewardship, where corporate water stewardship is today to where BWS would like it to go in the future. Corporate replenishment programs have gained traction over the past decade and have delivered significant value to watersheds and communities alike. As the industry progresses beyond the targeted impact of replenishment-only strategies towards driving transformational impact, the collective approach to how we develop, track, fund, and report these efforts will evolve. This table identifies some of the important ways in which BWS is innovating its past approach and evolving towards a more holistic approach to corporate water stewardship. The targeted impact column describes an approach that's focused primarily on securing very specific volume benefits with the least amount of risk of achieving those benefits as possible. The transformational impact column is what an approach looks like that is focused on catalyzing the greatest impact while addressing a broader set of risk factors. We believe that when we support a targeted range of project types, stages of development, and de-risking interventions, we can achieve measurable benefits that address enterprise volume goals while also driving beyond volumetric benefits to deliver multifaceted impact at the environmental and societal levels. Ultimately, a more strategic and multifaceted approach will provide better value to companies looking to manage water-related risks. We know that when we manage claims, credibility, and project performance, water stewardship and volumetric claims are real, and project performance stands up against stated goals. We know projects supported need to be seen as directly relevant and impactful to local challenges and communities to maintain the social license to operate and grow. We know ultimately corporate intervention and influence will need to be structured in ways that make real contributions to regional water security challenges. And finally, we know that when we take a broader approach to risk, we can have a greater impact on the resilience of watersheds and water supplies that ultimately allow companies to thrive. Thank you to the organizers of today's panel for the opportunity to participate. If anyone would like to connect with questions or to discuss any of what I presented, please don't hesitate to reach out. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. We are at time. So thanks so much for your participation today. I'm so happy to see all of you. This is my first presentation at the World Water Week, and I am very excited to meet you if you're going to be in Stockholm in person. So I am not going to go back to the slides. Enjoy the rest of your day and enjoy the rest of the event. So thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Nanda.
Bye.
Thank you.